Today's sew-along is for a wrap style skirt. I'm using McCall's 7960. This skirt offers different styles for different variations in fullness as well as pocket placement. I've chosen View A today. This skirt features hook and loops on the inside as well as a tie on the outside for extra stability and security while wearing. It's a great piece for mixing and matching with other tops in your wardrobe, as well as a great comfortable garment option for the summertime. You can find this pattern at your local fabric store and online. I've left a link for you below so you can check out all the details, grab a copy, and sew it along with me. So grab that pattern, cut out your fabric, mark your dots and your notches, and let's get started. Apply interfacing to the back of your waistband piece. Before I attach my pockets to the side seams of my front and back skirt pieces, I've gone ahead and serged each side of each pocket as well as the curved edges, and I've done this for all 4 pockets. I've also serged each of my side seams separately. Place one of your pockets from one of your pocket sets right sides together with the corresponding side seam, matching your notches and pin in place. Do this for both of your pockets, attaching them to both of your front skirt side seams. And then take them to your sewing machine and sew each pocket to this side seam with a 1/4 inch seam allowance from the top of the pocket to the bottom of the pocket. Grab your back skirt piece and attach your remaining set of pockets at the side seam, matching your notches. Note that I've also gone ahead and serged each side of my back piece, and I've done this separately on both sides. Now that our pockets are pinned in place to the back skirt piece, take it to your sewing machine and sew each pocket with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just as we did for the front pockets. Press the sewn seams of each of your pockets toward the pocket pieces. Now we can place our skirt and pocket pieces right sides together. With your back skirt and pocket pieces right side up, place your corresponding front skirt and pocket pieces right sides together with this back skirt piece, aligning your pockets, and now we can pin around the pockets and the side seams. Do this to attach both of your front skirt pieces to your back skirt piece. On each of your front and back pattern pieces at the side seams, you have dots indicating where to start and stop your stitching for the pocket seams. I've transferred my dots onto my fabric here using pins. For each of the side seams, I'm going to sew the front and back skirt pieces together, starting at the top of the skirt, all the way to the first dot, backstitching to secure. And this should be a 5/8 inch seam allowance from the serged edge of your skirt. Then I'm going to start a new set of stitches at the bottommost dot, again backstitching to secure, and then continuing all the way down with a 5/8 inch seam allowance to the bottom of the skirt. Then I'm going to sew each of my pockets together, also with a 5/8 inch seam allowance from the top of the pocket all around the curve. And then when you get to the side seam of your pocket, you're going to continue stitching over this seam until you meet the stitches that you made when you sewed that side seam of the skirt, and backstitch to secure. Do this for both of your side seams and both of your pocket sets. On your front pattern pieces, you have lines indicating where to fold back your front edges to create facings. The pattern instructions also give you a few options on how to finish these center front edges on both sides. I've just chosen to serge both of these raw edges. I've done this on both of the open sides of my front pieces. Now I'm going to take it to my ironing board and fold back these front edges to the wrong side along that fold line indicated on my pattern piece, and I'm going to do this on both sides. Now that I've pressed those memory creases on both sides, it's time to start gathering the top of the skirt. Starting at the top edge of one of your front skirt pieces, you're going to use the longest stitch on your machine and sew with about a 1/2 inch seam allowance until you reach your first side seam. Once you reach that side seam, don't backstitch, but instead leave thread tails so that you have threads to pull for gathering. We want to avoid sewing over this pocket because we don't want the pocket to be gathered. Once you've cut those thread tails on this side of the seam, flip your pocket out of the way and continue a fresh set of stitches, again leaving thread tails on this side, and continue stitching with your longest stitch length and a 1/2 inch seam allowance, again until you reach that side seam, leaving thread tails, and then moving that pocket out of the way once again and continuing those basting stitches until you're back at the top of your opposite front skirt piece. Take your interfaced waistband piece to your ironing board and fold your long unnotched edge to the wrong side by 5/8 of an inch. Also take your tie pieces to your ironing board and fold each of them in half lengthwise. Clip or pin your open long edge and the slanted edge, leaving the short open edge open. Do this for both of your tie pieces. Sew your slanted edge and continue stitching all along the long edge with a 5/8 inch seam allowance for both ties. Once your ties are folded and sewn, trim your seam allowances by about half, and then turn them both right side out. And then give these ties a really good press. Now take the short open end of one of your tie pieces and align it with the bottom right folded edge of your waistband. Match up your raw edges and line up that tie right along that folded edge. Pin in place. Take it to your machine and baste your tie in place, catching that folded edge of your waistband as you baste. Right in the middle of your waistband pattern piece, you have a line indicating where to fold your waistband in half. On each end of the waistband, you're going to fold it along that fold line, right sides together, and pin in place. And do this on both sides. Now we're going to stitch each of the short ends of our waistband with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, again catching that folded bottom edge as we sew, and do that on both sides. Now trim those seams that we just sewed by about half on both sides. Now you can turn both of these ends of your waistband right side out, poking out those corners, and then go to your ironing board and press your waistband along that fold line from side to side. Now we're going to attach the waistband and tie pieces to the top of the skirt. On your waistband pattern piece, you have many indicators showing you where to place the waistband along the top of the skirt. The square indicators tell you where to match the waistband with the side seams of your skirt, and you also have notches and lines indicating center front and center back. Place your waistband right sides together with the top of your skirt, matching all of those markings, and pin in place. Keep in mind as you're pinning that you want your pockets facing toward the front of your skirt. Once you have the waistband pinned at all of your markings, we can start pulling our gathering stitches to fit the skirt into the waistband. I'm going to start at one end of the skirt and gather that portion pin to pin. Once that portion of the skirt fits that portion of the waistband and the gathers are distributed evenly, you can go ahead and pin in place. And for this gathered front portion, I'm going to turn this pocket toward the front of the skirt, sandwiching that gathered skirt in between the waistband and the pocket. Making sure just to pin that raw edge of the waistband and not this opposite folded edge. Continue pulling your gathering stitches for each section and pin in place. Once you have the entire top of your waistband pinned in place, we're going to take this facing portion that we pressed earlier, that's extending beyond the waistband on both sides, and fold it over the waistband. Keep in mind that the top of this facing portion is not gathered, and pin in place. Do that on both sides. Take the top of the skirt to the sewing machine and sew with a 5/8 inch seam allowance all the way across, catching your facing, but being careful not to catch this folded edge of your waistband as you sew all the way across. Once the waistband is sewn, trim this top seam by about half. And then turn this waistband right side out, turning that folded edge to the inside of the garment and over the seam that we just sewed. Now we're going to pin this folded edge right on top of that seam, just covering those stitches, and pin in place all the way across. You have the option of using a needle and thread and slip stitching the facing to the top of the skirt all the way across, This way your stitching will be invisible from the outside of the skirt. But a faster method is to stitch in the ditch from the outside of the skirt, stitching inside of this seam that we just sewed all the way across. So go ahead and finish the inside of your waistband with your chosen method. I'm going to be stitching in the ditch with my sewing machine. Now here is the bottom edge of one of my front skirt pieces. We're going to take this facing and fold it along the crease that we made with our iron earlier. We're going to fold back that facing so it's right sides together with the skirt, and pin in place right along the bottom. Now we're going to sew this bottom edge of the facing with a 5/8 inch seam allowance just as far as this facing section. Do this for both front edges of both of your front skirt pieces. Now that we have those bottom sections of the facing sewn in place, we're going to trim the seam allowance, but just on the facing side of the fabric. We're just trimming this facing seam allowance by about half. And do that on both sides. Now you can turn this facing right side out and poke out that corner. Now that we've finished the bottoms of our facing this way, the rest of the bottom of the skirt wants to turn in 5/8 of an inch. So take this to your ironing board and press up that hem to the wrong side 5/8 of an inch all the way across. Once you've pressed up that bottom edge to the wrong side, we can do a rolled hem. Take the raw edge of your skirt and fold it to the crease that you just made with your iron, and then fold that folded portion on the crease and pin in place all the way across. Once you have your rolled hem pinned in place, take it to your sewing machine and edge stitch close to this inner fold all the way across the bottom of your skirt. I'm choosing to also sew my facing to the front of the skirt on both sides, right along the serged edge of my facing. This will keep the facing from wanting to flap around on the inside. I'm going to do this from the top of the facing all the way to the bottom of the hem on both sides of the skirt. Now I'm ready to sew my hook and loop pieces to the top of the skirt. Inside of the right side of the skirt, the side with the tie, I'm going to sew my hook pieces. I'm going to sew them so that the curved edge of the hook is facing toward the inside of the skirt. Instead of using the markings that are on the pattern piece, I wrapped the skirt around my waist to see right where I wanted my hooks and loops to go, and I marked those placements here with pins. Using a needle and thread, I'm going to sew each of the hooks in place right at those pin markings. Once you've hand sewn both of those hooks to the inside of the skirt on the right side, hand sew the loops on the opposite opening of your skirt. After trying the skirt on myself, I've also placed pins here where I want the loops to go. Now it's time to attach our remaining tie piece. On the side of your skirt opposite the side that already has a tie piece attached, the side that should have your hooks, we're going to place the short raw edge of our tie piece right at the seam line. And you should also have a marking on your waistband that shows you where to place that tie. With the pointed edge of your tie facing the back of your skirt, line up that raw edge of the tie piece so that the seam line of your skirt aligns with the tie piece 5/8 of an inch away from the edge of that tie, and pin in place. Now we're going to sew vertically right in line with that seam line, stitch back and forth a few times to secure. Now that that tie piece is attached, trim this tie seam by about half, and then turn this tie piece over its own seam so that the pointed edge of the tie is now facing toward the front of the skirt. Take it to your machine and top stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from this seam that we just sewed for the tie to secure it in place. And now your skirt is complete. Thank you for watching this sew along. Make sure you check out my other videos for more great sewing inspiration, and I'll see you in the next video.